Good evening, everybody in Alberta, Canada, and beyond. It is Wednesday, October 18th, 2023, and I'm Kerry Lambert, and I welcome you to an online webinar evening of solutions for a new Alberta, brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project, also known as APP. APP's purpose is to educate, inspire, and unite all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect their prosperity, individual freedoms, rights, and sovereignty by empowering the Alberta government to restructure Alberta's relationship with Canada. APP is membership driven with a goal of 1 million plus members to help steer the political process. And you can find out more at albertaprosperityproject.com. We've actually got a lot to cover tonight, and we're kind of limited to just doing within an hour. So I'm going to bring on our CEO, interim CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project, Christopher Scott. And there he is there. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing well. It is strange to hear my full name used. Often that means I'm in trouble. So
I could say Christopher James. Christopher James, what did you do today?
I've heard that a lot. Yeah. Yeah. And if you held up a red Tupperware ladle, I'd admit to things I haven't done anyway.
That's fun. So tonight's show is actually called Your Pets Are an Economic Indicator of Prosperity. And our guest is Jim deBoon, who's an animal control specialist. And before we get into that, I did want to bring up a few things that happened this weekend. Because, of course, they're all related to the Alberta Prosperity Project. We actually had a few events. Let me just call it up on the screen here. A few events happened across southern Alberta. We had an event in Cowley, and an event in Stavely, and an event in Blackie this weekend, in which Chris was one of the speakers, and I happened to join them down in Blackie on the Sunday. And then we did another event just last night with Friends of Science, and we were talking about climate change, and we heard from a couple of great speakers. We had a table set up during that. So I just wanted to get your take on how the last few days have gone with the Alberta Prosperity Project, Chris. What do you think?
Well, I'm pretty excited that we're getting rolling again.
Yeah.
The events in Southern Alberta, they went off great. Thanks to our new event coordinator. You may know Miss Vicky Bayford.
I do know her.
Fantastic job putting those together. It was good to be out and engaging with people again, answering questions, speaking about where we see Alberta going, doing the things that we were supposed to be doing. So that was fantastic. And then last night at the Friends of Science, that was excellent as well. We heard from Robert Lyman, who is a economist, what was his title?
He used to basically do stuff.
Industrial economist.
He
was speaking about the economic impacts of net zero and what it looks like. And folks, if you haven't gotten to the bottom of that and dug down into what that looks like for you and your future and your family's future, you better know, because if you are silent on these policies and they go through, in a nutshell, in Canada, to transition to net zero by 2035, we're looking at $107,000 per Canadian man, woman, and child. That's what it's going to cost us. That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
But it's important just to mention. And also we heard from Dr. Ian Clark, and he was dispelling the myth about CO2-driven climate change. And actually what the evidence is showing, it appears as though it is temperature-driven CO2 change.
That's
which
right.
is quite interesting. So we're going to do a whole series on that. And we'll talk about that later.
I did want to at least acknowledge that's what we've been doing. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes as well. And of course, this weekend, they, being Chris and Dennis Modry and Corey Morgan, of course, are up in they are in Vermilion, Plamondon, and Fort McMurray. So you can always go on the Alberta Prosperity Project website and take a look at that, and even register, because they do want RSVP so they know how many seats to set out and what needs to happen in the hall, etc., etc. So with that, we are now going to bring on our guest, Jim deBoon, and he is. I'm just going to call up his little web page here too. Where are we here? We are right there. He is an animal control specialist, and we're going to talk a little bit about pets and how they show themselves as being an economic indicator. So with that, I will bring Jim on. How are you doing, Jim?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
Excellent, thank
Awesome.
you.
Perfect.
So
yeah, I guess
I was just going to say, do you want to maybe just introduce yourself and give a little bit of history on why you're so good at what you do in terms of animal control?
So I don't know. I hard to talk about yourself like that, but I was unemployed when I was 18. I was desperate. I ended up walking into a community town office when I read in the paper that people were complaining about their animal services, and I didn't want to do it. But the way it worked out was I was unemployed, living at home, 18 years old. My mom said, "You're not in school, you're not working, you have to apply for unemployment insurance. So you have to do what your mom says." So I remember doing that. And a month went by and I get this check in the mail and it's for $845.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how in people's lives, when they're like in addiction issues or they have these problems in life and they have to like get to a really bad spot before, rock bottom, before they're going to do something drastic and change their life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I opened up this check for $845 as a healthy 18-year-old kid in Alberta who could work, in my mind, that was my rock bottom. I'm like, I am so useless. The government has to pay me to do nothing. And I didn't realize that was a prerequisite to become a Canadian senator. But I I get this check and I'm like, I will do anything so in a month from now I don't get another check. And then I
Yeah.
read this article complaining about the animal services was a contracted service in this town. And this light bulb goes on in my head. And I thought I could do that. And then I went, oh no, I'd be a dog catcher. I'm gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything as a human that I could do that would be worse to my fellow man than if I became a dog catcher?
Yeah.
And I thought to myself for a second, well, I could still become a politician or a lawyer. So there was like two things I could think of that were lower in my mind as an 18-year-old Albertan than if I became a
Yeah.
dog catcher. And the reason was is because I'd met one when I was 16. My dog got out, and I wasn't nice to him, and he wasn't professional to me. So that was my only encounter with a dog catcher or animal control officer, we're called now.
Yeah.
And I watched Walt Disney movies.
Mm-hmm.
And every Walt Disney movie, the dog catcher's a moron that hates dogs.
That is very true.
So
that's
all I knew. Anyway, so I went to town hall. I said, I want to see the manager. He saw me. I talked to him for 20 minutes. His statement to me was, "Jim, we're desperate. We'll try you."
Mm-hmm.
That's how I got hired. They were desperate and they tried an 18-year-old kid with no. And so that started 41 years ago. I told him I would do it for 6 months because I've started 8 other businesses since because I never planned to do this. I was always going to be in business. I knew I was an entrepreneur. I had a roller rink. I had a butter tart business. I had a security business. I had a
wow.
I've started 8 businesses, but this one is stuck around. And so then it grew into a boarding kennel, and then it grew into doggy daycare and grooming. And we have basically more or less help rescues now. So my whole world has been dogs since I was 18 years old. And so now I train officers under enforcement training on how to deal with dogs. I've trained a couple thousand officers on how to deal with dogs that want to kill you. And so that's kind of what I do for fun.
And that's how Jim and I met, Kerry. Just so you know.
Yeah,
so Jim has arrested my dog. I don't know, 6 times or 7 times or something.
I think it was 2 or 3, but
it was a lot. It was too many times for my dog to be in jail.
Arrested your dog with handcuffs in
up against the wall, pat him down, throw him in the truck.
I got to say Houdini, that dog.
I gotta say, Chris, you were a lot more polite with your encounters with me than I was at 16 with the guy that I met. I was not nice.
Yeah.
You were very well behaved.
I try. I really love that dog, but he. So the backstory there is I was working in Wabasca in the oil patch as a consultant, and this dog, I was actually driving truck then, and this dog just every morning he was at camp, and then one day he chased me down the highway and jumped in my truck when I stopped. I'm like, well, I guess I have a res dog now, right? So I take this dog home. He's a fantastic dog, but he just wanted to live that life, and there was nothing I could do to keep him in my yard. So Jim ended up finding a spot for him where he could just run all over the place, and now I'm assuming he's a happy boy. So
he is
good.
Yeah.
So the topic, of course, we're basically talking about how having a pet is an economic driver, and I mean that. When we were talking about what to actually title this, it was like, wow, I didn't even think of that. Maybe just kind of bring us up to speed on why do you think that there's an economic driver to that?
So economic driver might be
Whenever economic indicator is actually
indicator, like canary in the coal mine financially.
That's right. Yes, exactly.
So again, 18 years old, I started doing what I did, and I bought a $300 truck. I bought the biggest fishing net I could find because, of course, that's what Walt Disney taught me, and I'm not making that up. And I started going, and I noticed those first 2, 3, 4 years, a little over half the dogs I picked up would go home, which means a little under half the dogs I picked up wouldn't. And so, I mean, when you got 60% of your dogs going home, that means 40% aren't, and I'd have to adopt those dogs out.
Yeah.
And honestly, as an 18-year-old kid with not really my eye on the macro picture of finances and stuff like that, I just kind of assumed back then that, you know, people were just crappy dog owners.
Mhm.
I am now I'll be 60 years old in a month. and I am seeing, because when I figured when this statistic came to me, I sat down it was in August, and I just quickly get a snapshot of where we were, and I saw this number of about 59% return to owner rate. I
Mhm.
literally physically got sick to my stomach because I was like, holy smokes, I'm back in 1982. What's going on here? Because my
Yeah.
normal return to owner rate for dogs is, for the last 15, 20 years, is 93, 94, 95, 96%. So if I
Which is
pick up
what you
100
expect.
dogs,
Yeah.
94, 95, 96 go home, and then 3 or 4 need to be adopted out.
Yeah.
And when I figured this out a few months ago and I saw it, I literally got almost physically sick because I'm like, I'm not doing anything different. I haven't changed anything. Why is this number? Because last year the number dropped to 85%,
Mhm.
which I thought was startling. It dropped 10% last year, but it's dropped much more this year.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have 30 some thousand people on our Facebook page, and so did the rescue that we worked with have almost that many. I
Yeah.
mean, we didn't have trouble adopting out dogs. And I've talked to King County in Washington State. I've talked to the biggest rescue in Alberta. I've talked to Calgary City, Edmonton, and the situation is endemic. It's endemic. It's ubiquitous. It's all over North America.
Mhm.
And so what you've got is a situation because of finances, because of government policy and where we are fiscally, because everyone that's decent in the industry agrees this is an economic reality we're facing. What's happening is you have less people can afford and looking to adopt an animal, and
Mhm.
you have people dumping animals,
Yeah.
and that means they're not coming to get them when they dump them, and that's on purpose. And so I talked to the one main rescue in Alberta here, the biggest, and they average 80 adoptions a month, but their average intake is 120 a month.
Hmm.
So you can't keep doing that, or you
No.
end up with thousands of dogs in shelter because it just builds up every month.
Yeah.
And so when I sat and looked at this, and I'm like, well, what was happening in 1982 when I started? And I'm like, well, we had the same last name for a prime minister, and a few years prior to that, that person had huge deficits, created inflation, which then created 20% interest rates.
Mhm.
Now, the baseline interest rate before that mess started was somewhere between 5 and 7%.
Yeah.
And then when it shot up in 79, 80-ish, somewhere in there, 81 to 20 and 21%, we were seeing almost a four-fold increase in the base rate for the interest rates
Mhm.
in Canada. And my mom and dad lost a house during that period that they had built because my dad ended up getting sick. They couldn't pay the bills. They lost the house. It was untenable. And people are in that position today. And the reason is because when you go and print $600 billion worth of money, it's chasing the same number of goods. You create inflation,
Mhm.
and the inflation forces the Bank of Canada to do a 20-fold increase in the base rate of 0.25%, which is now
Hold on a
5%.
sec, Jim. So in the early 80s, when things were terrible, it was a 3 or 4 fold increase. Now we saw, what was the number again?
It's a 20-fold increase from 0.25% to 5% is a 20-fold increase,
Wow.
right? Now, understanding since you're starting at a smaller number, it's, it's not
It
quite as
doesn't feel
dramatic.
right. Yeah.
It's not as dramatic as going from 7% to 21%.
Yeah.
But the reality is the increase, this is literally like some young prime minister saying to his dad, hold my beer. If you think you screwed it up, hold my beer.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show you what to really do. And so we're in a position now. COVID had a bit to do with it because COVID created an anomaly in our field because during 2020, when everyone was being paid to stay home, everyone in their, pardon the pun, dog thought they should go get an animal, cat or dog. And I saw US high kill rescues in the States posting that for the first time in their 120-year history, their shelters were empty. People were adopting dogs that should never have been adopted. They were, aggressive, problematic health issues, but
Wow.
people didn't care. They were, I mean, you could have adopted. And then during that time, people with intact dogs figured out what was going on, and everyone and their dog started breeding dogs
Hmm.
and selling them for $600, $700, $800, $900. Doodles were going for $35,000, $4,000. Okay. The rescue I work with just took 30 some doodles from a breeder who couldn't give them away, and they were $3,500 24 months ago.
Jeez.
Okay. So this is a paradigm shift in our society based mostly on economics. Now, the anomaly from COVID so if you do a graph and then you've got adoptions kind of running along like this, so many dogs a year, whatever, COVID was a spike. Well,
Yeah.
some of the people in that spike were thinking of adopting 6 months or 2 years, a year down the road. They were planning on it, and they just went out during COVID and did it. So what
Yeah.
that happens is when you go past that point, there's a lag in the number of people looking for dogs because they decided to jump the gun right there.
Yeah.
So they would have been adopting down the road. So you have a huge spike. All these dogs get adopted. A lot of them shouldn't have been adopted. You have the people that aren't looking now because they went through COVID and got their dog, and so you have a lesser adoption rate.
Yeah.
And then anyways, this is where we're at. So COVID had a small impact, but I would say the COVID impact was felt mostly last year. Now you have all these animals. Some people that shouldn't have adopted during COVID are, regurgitating their animals and saying I can't or whatever, and that's something. And remember, there are terrible, lazy, bad people that choose for stupid reasons to dump an animal. That's always been that way, and that will always be that way.
Hmm.
But that's typically a small number of the population, and we've been dealing with that forever because irresponsible people are irresponsible. You can't change that.
Hmm.
But what we're seeing now is people with no option and no choice. And so they have lost their job, or their mortgage just renewed and it went from $1,800 to $3,800.
Yeah.
They don't have the money. They have to sell the house or give the house back. They're a family of 4 with a dog. They have to go somewhere in 8 to 10 days or whatever the number is.
Yeah.
And they go to every rescue and every shelter and every humane society and say, we can't rent a house with this dog.
Yeah.
We can't take this dog with us. And no rescue or shelter will take it. And then they drive off into the country. And I was just talking to the lady in Calgary today from the rescue. She was saying that the Humane Society in Calgary, there's a road on the edge of Calgary where people they just get called there to pick up stray dogs. People know that that's the area. They go there, they pick up the stray dogs, and the dogs are just not reclaimed because these people are honest, good people, hardworking people, but they're trapped in a financial system that is beyond their control. And to Chris's point, what he said earlier, the only real solution, because I was sitting here brainstorming with this other key leader in the industry today, and her and I are sitting there going, we got nothing. Like, we can't magically create great, healthy, loving homes out of thin air when people don't have the money.
Yeah.
Unless your whole economy does better and you do better as a group, then you create the environment in which people are like, hey, we're comfortable, we're safe, we need a dog.
Yeah.
Right, Chris?
Absolutely. And that comment that Kerry put up, we spoke about that a little bit too, Jim. There's
I'll just put it back up again.
Yeah,
Aurora says people cannot afford to have pets anymore. Landlords have long been refusing tenants with pets because of irresponsible tenants and pet owners.
I concur.
I would say that's 50% right. I don't agree that it's because of irresponsible tenants and pet owners. I believe it's because of irresponsible government policy and regulation that puts all of the onus on the landlord to recover costs that are from
that is true. Yes.
Right. That's the problem. If it was a free market and we could decide or we could recover costs for rental units damaged by pets, people might be much more willing to take that risk. But right now, what landlord in the right mind would risk having any pets in a rental house and facing $20,000 or $30,000 of damages that they can't recover?
Luckily, some still do. But and I was telling you guys before we got on the air, I had a brother who had a rental property in Red Deer, and some people went in there, and there was a pet deposit and there was the damage deposit, and they said all the right things and whatever. Long story short, after 12 months of renting this house, there was $25,000 to $30,000 damage, and you couldn't recoup it. You got a $1,600 damage deposit, and I think it was like $300 a piece pet deposit. So basically, it cost him $25,000 in 1 year to rent that house out. So yeah.
It's not a very attractive outlook for a landlord, that's for sure.
But the person that made that post did say, I mean, the problem is because, I mean, you know, out of every 10 pet owners, 9 of them are not going to wreck your house. They're not going to damage it.
Mhm.
They take care of their animal.
Yeah.
Yes, there's that 1 in 10, or maybe it's 1 in 20, whatever that number is. But if you're the landlord that gets that guy, you're the one that gets a big financial kick in the head,
Mhm.
is what happens. So it is. And I mean, so, you know, landlords choose to err on the side of caution, and you can criticize and condemn them for that, but they've got a $400,000 mortgage on that property. They've got insurance on that property. And, you know, if it all goes well, they'll make 10, 15%, hopefully,
Yeah.
on that investment. But they're taking all the risk.
Yeah. Here's another statement from Karen saying COVID got everyone getting pets. They did not train them. They are out of control at dog parks, but then they went back to work.
Interesting.
So I know a few people that did get pets, and exactly that. You know, they were at home all the time for a year or whatever. Basically got them as a puppy, and now all of a sudden you're going back into downtown Calgary and you have to leave your pet at home. The pets are confused. They don't know what the hell to do.
And I mean, I've adopted out thousands of pets over 41 years. And the reality is that, you know, people have ideas in their mind when they go to adopt an animal, and the idea in their mind, it's kind of like this romantic idea. It's going to work out a certain way. When they get the animal home, the animal's energy level is too high. It's insecure. It's got separation anxiety, whatever the reason is, and it's not the romantic idea in your mind, and it becomes very, very, very. Who pays for keeping abandoned pets? Is that the question?
Mhm.
Connie
You can
Smith.
finish your other.
I know her. Hi, Connie. And the answer to that question, Connie, would be mostly animal services and shelters. That's the answer to your question. And so
Wow.
in my case, it's me. I have 94 animals in care right now, that I need to feed and vet and take care of until I find them homes.
Now, how often or how many do you normally have? You said you have 90, but
Okay, so again, there's a bit of a change here because the rescue we work with had all the animals in care, and we're moving in separate directions now. So I ended up taking 94 from the rescue that we work with, but they still have 75. So there's about 160 animals in care at
Mhm.
this moment in time. And so because we've kind of divvied it up, and they're going to take some to try to find homes, and I'm taking some to try to find homes, I need to find homes for about 94-ish animals right now, plus the 15 that came in the last 8 days. So,
Wow.
mhm,
So
yeah.
this is actually quite a big. Oh, my phone is ringing. Give me a second. Chris, you want?
Who has a landline these days?
I
Wow.
still do it. I don't know why. Yeah.
I haven't had a landline in years.
Yeah. There you go.
Was it a telemarketer, Kerry?
That's the only reason I have that is because I really enjoy having telemarketers, and actually the way my house alarm system works is it doesn't do cell. It still works on a landline, so I pretty much need a landline. But I'm not sure. Yeah, obviously it very rarely happens where someone will call, and sure enough, here it is. Interesting.
I thought maybe it was the Conservative Party of Canada looking for money from you, Kerry.
They probably are, or the NDP are hounding me for money, wanting me to support them.
They called me always during supper.
Yeah, exactly.
We have some constructive feedback from Brandon there. He says, "You're a fraud, Chris. You don't have everyone fooled, just the mindless ones." But you're entitled to your opinion, Brandon. I would suggest that if you're going to call people mindless, spell correctly. Apostrophe R-E. Thanks.
Oh boy, yeah. I forgot exactly where I was going with that. Sorry, but there's a couple of other comments here too. Another factor is the cost of veterinary care that really is so much more expensive.
I'm not sure. I don't know that person as well. Anyways, veterinary costs are substantial.
Yeah.
And when you're, as a family, running into financial crisis, you can't just close your Disney Plus account and pay for all your problems.
Yeah.
Reference there to our Chrystia Freeland, but veterinary costs have gone up a lot. So for example, the rescue that we worked with last year, or maybe it was the year before, I can't remember, it was one of the 2 recent years, they get a 40% discount off of what you and I pay, and their vet bill for that 1 year was $346,000. And that's all going to be raised. And it is expensive. It is super expensive. But at the same time, the cost of when you take the minimum wage in 3 years and you go from $10 an hour to $15 an hour.
Mhm.
So, I mean, as a business owner, when the wonderful previous government did that, we were just getting our footing under us. We had the new kennel built and we're getting our footing under us. We're trying to get going. And my single biggest expense was wages. And they went to me and they said, well, they didn't go to me. They just went along and said, as a business owner, I'm going to take your biggest expense and I'm going to increase it by 50% in 3
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And I mean, veterinarians don't pay minimum wage, but instead of paying maybe a starting wage of $16 or $18 an hour, now because of that, they've got to have a starting wage of $23, $25 an hour. And that's just for the kid that just came out of, vet tech school or whatever.
Yeah.
Not begrudging them that, not saying that's bad, but I'm just saying when you go and arbitrarily move those bars up,
Mhm.
you create a cascading effect. For example, I am not, as a business owner and as an entrepreneur, I have a relative in Kelowna working at a Tim Hortons, and he's been at the same Tim Hortons 19 years. He's still making minimum wage.
Wow.
And I mean, yeah,
But
maybe
I always say, if you're doing that, he must be happy. Is he happy doing that?
well, I mean, he likes what he's doing, but I mean, the fact of the matter is that the cost to get by every day
Yeah.
goes up at a certain pace, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so here, yeah, I would like to start people at a minimum wage of what used to be $10 an hour, because I'm going to pay you to go pick up dog poop. And you don't need a bachelor's of education to go pick up dog poop and wash kennels. Okay. Now you show me you're good at what you do, and I will start raising your wage. And that's what I want to do. But if my minimum wage is now $15 an hour, I've got people that are 2-3 years in that I was paying $15, $16 an hour to, and I want to pay them 17, 18. But since I've got to pay the poop scooper 15, I don't have the money to pay them 20.
Yeah.
Because you've taken up, because you've raised that beginning bar.
Mhm.
And that's my argument as an entrepreneur, is that, people say, well, everyone deserves a living wage. You know what? If you're productive to a business, and the hardest thing right now, and Chris can probably attest to this, is finding good employees and keeping them,
Mhm.
because it's difficult as an entrepreneur. So, I mean, this market, if you're any good and you don't like where you are, this is a great time to make a move. I was talking to a guy at a place yesterday or 2 days ago, and he was saying that one of his coworkers has up for him, and his boss kind of got it up for him, and he's in a skilled trade. And I said, well, if you want to go move somewhere else, I know like 5 places right now. They're looking for guys like you, and he'll get more money.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't have I don't, I said this to Chris earlier today. I said, one of my favorite quotes from Ronald Reagan is that Ronald Reagan said this: the scariest phrase in the English language is this. It said, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think I was going to ask you guys, in your minds, if you think of like, and I know left and right and all this crap, but when you think of like liberal ideology and conservative ideology, do you have
Mhm.
a way to kind of condense it into kind of a statement of what the differences are?
You know what, Jim? I've given up. I've given up trying to separate liberal and conservative, because I don't think there's really not much of a difference. As a matter of fact, I realized over the last few years that I wasn't really a conservative at all. In the classic sense, of the word, I'm a liberal, because I believe that people should be free to do as they wish, as long as they're not harming other people, and the government should just stay out of their lives. But the term, the liberal, has been hijacked and now is a thinly veiled attempt to disguise Marxism.
Yeah.
So, what I've determined is that we're not facing a liberal or conservative issue. This is a human and anti-human issue, plain and simple.
Yeah.
Our governments have said, we're going to pursue this at all costs. And the thing of the day is net zero. We're going to pursue net zero at all costs. Well, they failed to tell people what the human costs were.
Yeah.
We don't have governments that are saying, we're going to pursue prosperity and human flourishing at all costs, which we should. The narrative has shifted, and now people they're hoodwinked into following these ideologies.
Yeah.
And they don't realize how it's going to impact them until they're at the end of the road saying goodbye to their dog and just dumping it for somebody else to pick up.
It's funny, because I actually do follow, I guess, extremes on Facebook and other social media. So I do follow, we'll say, the far left, and I follow the far right, just to kind of see if there's any common ground. And if anybody's out there that's watching and they're pretty much just following, I only watch the videos that I want to see or anything like that. Expand your mind a little bit and watch ones that you don't do, or what's ones that you wouldn't normally be, because I can tell you right now that things are coming together. There are things that people would say far left that, we do things as a collective. We're all about the people, and the conservatives are all about just being themselves. And you can also say, from a conservative point of view, we do want to help everybody. That's the whole point of why we're even doing the Alberta Prosperity Project, is we want to be able to do stuff for everybody. But they don't see that from that side. But there are certain topics that have been coming up lately, even just the pension plan and things that we've been talking about already. And there is this melding of the minds where they can actually see the benefits in doing both of those things. And especially when you watch stuff down in the States, and they're talking about, whether you're a Republican or a Democratic state. And so one of them, of course, is you may have heard in I believe it's Alabama. They actually outlawed one of the Chinese companies from basically saying that you have to give back the farmland that you bought from America. You have to give back to America, and we want the Chinese influence out. And the most amazing thing is both sides agree with it. So there are some things that people do agree on. It's just a matter of finding what they are. And of course, you bring up the idea of pets and being, what kind of economic impact and indicator does that do? And everybody loves pets. I don't care whether you're left or right. And if you can see that there's an issue with being able to afford a pet, then you know what? I think we need to have these conversations on how we can actually make pets get back to where they were before. I mean, honestly, I don't have a pet because my life is way too busy. And maybe it does have a little bit of an impact in terms of money, because I don't think it would be fair for myself to have a dog and have to kennel it for every couple of weekends. I'd much rather have a pet that I can definitely enjoy coming home to, or maybe even or a chia pet, or maybe even bringing a pet with me. Right. Mm-hmm. There are lots of different jobs out there where you can actually bring your pet with you. Right. So
yeah. Yeah. No, like I said, the reality we're seeing in our field, it's really it's a result of a situation.
Yeah.
Oh, it was Arkansas.
It was Arkansas, not I knew it was an A.
In the South. But like I say, I mean, what I'm noticing, and like I say, I now look back at 1981, 82, 83, 84, and based on where we were then and based on what I'm seeing now, I feel like we're probably still at least a year, hopefully only a year, away from the bottom of this fiscal cycle that we're flying into as a result of all these policies and these decisions. I'm hoping that it's only a year away. I'm hoping it's not 2 more years like this.
Yeah.
Because
you called it a fiscal cycle, Jim. So would you say this is a natural fiscal cycle or an artificial one?
I would say that the majority of fiscal cycles are created by the people that pull the strings. That might sound conspiracy theorist, but when I watched what happened to my parents in 1982 when they lost their house, and it was almost like a harvesting of real estate at that time. There was small groups of organizations that were able to buy a lot of properties for a very reasonable price,
and they got very wealthy.
And get very wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, when you look at, so can I go on a bit of a tangent here for a second?
We always do on tangents, always.
Okay. So my wife and I just celebrated 35 years. And so as a gift to ourselves, we just did a driving tour of Ireland and Scotland for 18 days. And so we saw all the old civilizations and the castles and all this stuff, and which clans were killing which clans and all this stuff. And so as I listened to all this history, and by the way, Chris, there's a jail in Dublin that's still there. It was built in the 1700s, and some of the occupants that were there in the 1800s ended up becoming part of the parliament because they were fighting for the freedom of Ireland, and the powers that be didn't like that they were fighting for freedom. They threw them in this jail, and then 35 years later they came back as MPs. I was thinking of you when I was hearing the stories. But anyways, the reason I'm digressing is because basically if you look at human history en masse, You get people broken into groups, and this clan fights that clan, and there's this war. This king is mad at that king, and it was just an unending series of wars. Now, the way in a group, say over here, Ireland or Scotland, the way you can get all these people to quit fighting each other is you need a common enemy. Then they'll put their hate for the other guys aside, and then they'll go and fight the common enemy. Well, if you're looking to create a one world currency and a one world government, you need to create a common enemy like climate change. Something that you'll give up your rights for, you'll give up your whatever for, your country for, and so instead of having everyone fighting themselves, you need a common enemy. And the common enemy that we're being fed right now is this thing that we're bad, that we're the carbon they're trying to reduce, you and I, and that we need to feel bad about living, and that we need to do everything that they tell us to drive these giant carbon holes called electric vehicles that use coal. I drove to the coast here 2 months ago, and I saw this huge, massively long train all hauling coal to the coast. Okay. And it's like, look at all that electric car food. That's amazing. And so we're being fed a line. But the only way that you can control people is, number one, they must be in fear. Number two, they must be confused. And number three, you have to present them a common enemy so that they'll give up of themselves, and then they will go and do the things you're asking them to do. Sidetrack.
Well,
no, that's good. That's good.
I'm glad you brought that up, because right now we live in a time where we have an unbelievable amount or almost unlimited access to the very thing that increased human prosperity, longevity, and quality of life more than anything else across the history of time. And that is hydrocarbons. When we started using oil and gas, we saved the whales. We made hundreds and hundreds of different types of medicine that saved lives. We effectively dealt with catastrophic climate events like hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, fires, those types of things. We did that by harnessing the power of hydrocarbons. We've shrunk the world so that we can hop on a plane and go to Amsterdam and visit for a day and come back if we really want to. I mean, not 2 stars, don't recommend, but we could. And yet here we are fighting against that, and actually, and not me, but society is advocating for a return to pre-prosperity. That's what we're doing. And you nailed it, Jim. It's because we've been convinced that we have this enemy we have to fight at all costs. Now, what's surprising, but I suppose isn't surprising, is if we look across history, there are dozens examples of the exact same thing. I mean, you saw it in Ireland. I saw it in Britain. I saw it in Holland. We have so many examples of periods in time in which people were convinced to give up their rights, freedoms, and prosperity for some common goal that turned out to be completely fake. And we're doing it again and again and again.
But if you say this, Chris, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. Okay?
Oh, that's fine. Everybody knows I'm crazy.
But I'm just saying that's the play of the whatever. But I mean, I was in these castles, and all they were was this person was doing this to kill this person, and this person was doing this to do this, and then this was the plan here, and this was the plan there, and it's an unending cacophony of conspiracies. I mean, at least now, finally, for example, conspiracy that's coming up to its 60th anniversary was the killing of John F. Kennedy, and only the really uninformed could believe that the lone gunman killed that president. It's not possible. It was not possible. And the only other alternative is that the government itself killed its own president in 1963. Well, if that's the case then, and that was 60 years ago, are you really going to sit here and tell me that you don't think that larger and worse manifestations of those kinds of conspiracies are not happening today? You really believe something's changed in mankind?
We're more enlightened. I mean, we learned from history, so we don't have to repeat it. We're more enlightened. We do better now than we did.
Enlightened, and we have this thing called the internets that allow us to share so much information, and
we would never persecute somebody because we didn't understand something. Never.
Yeah,
just wouldn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you know what? And I'll put myself in this category. We are dumber today than we were 20 years ago. And I'll give you an example. If I need to go from here to somewhere in Edmonton right now, okay, I used to actually have to get in my mind where it was, or maybe pull out a map and figure out where I'm going. Now I just stick it in my phone, and I don't even think about, my phone reroutes me en route if there's a car accident. And if it's taking me down the side road, I just assume it knows what it's doing and I follow it.
Yeah,
I don't actually have to think. Okay. Well, we've got 30 years of people now driving for 20 years with Google that haven't had to think about where they're going. Okay.
very
And
Never
true.
I'm the
cracked the
same.
map.
And I'm the same way now. I don't need to think about it, right? And yet we have all this information and all this stuff, and yet because of the way algorithms work, and creating these hive minds on the left and hive minds on the right, we're meaner to each other. We're ruder to each other. We
Hmm.
don't have the connections we used to have. When I grew up, our door was unlocked outside of Calgary, and people would walk in and help themselves to coffee because we lived by a railroad. And the railroad guys would just walk in, and that wasn't weird. Okay, that's how we lived. Now
Yeah,
everyone is scared of everyone, and
yeah,
COVID put a pinnacle on that.
yeah,
It put an icing on the cake on that.
yeah.
We are dumber, we are scareder, and we are easier to manipulate now than we ever were, even in spite of all this stuff. Like even what you're doing tonight, this is going counterculture against what the big guys want to say, and thank God you're doing it, and good on you guys.
Mhm.
But I don't know how many people are watching this, but it's going to be less than 500 and more than 50.
Yeah,
So how
that's
many
right.
people are watching?
292 right now.
Okay, so
Right.
hello everybody. Thanks for tuning
Yeah,
in. But the reality is that number needs to be 292,000, and then we get somewhere.
I agree.
So, speaking of getting somewhere, we have less than 17 minutes left.
Yes.
Let's talk about some solutions. I mean,
Okay.
you mentioned that you and some of your colleagues were talking about what are the solutions to deal with the problem that you guys are facing, which is a low number of pets being returned to owners. So,
Y-
how do we solve these problems?
And you think with 41 years doing this, and I'm one of the guys that trains people in this industry, and I'm one of the, for better or worse, one of the leaders in the industry. Shy of what you said, improving the overall economy, there actually is now. If I say what I'm about to say, I'm gonna break open a world of hurt,
Can I
because
can I call up your website so that people know where to get a hold of you too?
yeah, you can bring up Classic Kennels if you want. That's our boarding kennel, and that's where we will be showing the adoptive dogs soon. We
Okay.
haven't been doing that for 5 years, but we will be doing posts on our Facebook page for adoptions.
Yeah.
So what I'm about to say, I need to preface, because if this gets out, this could be horrible. Um, in times past, when I started this, when shelters got over full, shelters across North America would euthanize cats and dogs for space. That's
Mhm.
what they used to do. By and large, in Alberta, that has not happened for 15 to 20 years. Okay. Because we've always been able to find homes for pets. Now, I am not saying this will happen, and I'm not advocating for this. I am just saying that when you say what are options, that's a big, ugly thing that when I say we, I mean this field used to do commonly 25, 35, 45 years ago. That was a common practice, healthy animals just being put down.
Mm.
Now, I'm going to do everything in my power to make
That's
that not
Guy.
happen. Where?
That's my dog.
Yeah, he was
You
in a picture
rehomed
with the other
on the
dogs.
right.
That's okay. The Rottweiler beside him is mine.
Ryan?
Huh.
Yeah,
I miss Guy.
that Rottweiler beside him is Roscoe. So, anyways, when you say solutions, there's two kinds of solutions in the world. There's the happy, fluffy, wonderful ones, and then there's the ones that are dark and ugly.
Solve
And
the problem, but they're unpalatable.
yeah, and I mean, I've never had to euthanize a dog for space in my 41 years, or cat for that matter. We've only euthanized animals that either had like serious, like life debilitating health issues, or they were aggressive to the point where they're dangerous. Um, but I mean, when you've got a problem as ubiquitous as the one we're facing right now, literally across all of North America, and you have abandonments and strays at this level, and you have um, viable, proper adoption homes shrinking, um, you can't pull an answer out of thin air.
Mhm.
Like you can't. I mean, like I say, what Chris said, the only way you could fix this is if people had more disposable income, and the only way people are going to have more disposable income is if we have lower taxes, less government, and more freedom to spend our money to live the life the way we want to live it.
So
And how we get there is bigger than me.
speaking of less money, Well, I'll propose a solution for you after this, and it's not a quick one, but it is a solution. So at the Friends of Science event last night that Kerry and Vicky and Jessica and I went to, Dr. Ian Clark was talking about the economic impacts of net zero for Canada.
Mhm.
And he said that the Royal Bank had done a study, and they determined that the cost to transition our economy to net zero by 2035 was $3.7 trillion.
Yeah.
Trillion with a T.
$107,000 per man, woman, and child.
$107,000 every man, woman, and child. Now you tell me, who's going to be able to afford their homes, let alone their pets, when that happens? Right? We're facing some pretty serious things. Now, when it comes to solutions, of course, we always bring this back to what the Alberta Prosperity Project advocates for, which is Alberta being free and prosperous through independence. And right now, we're seeing some synergies and some alignment with what our government is doing. Our government passed the Alberta Sovereignty Act within a united Canada. And basically that says Alberta is going to stand up to the federal government in any area where they try to encroach on our sovereign constitutional jurisdiction. That's fair. We should have been doing that the whole time. I think we need something more than that. We need to shift the narrative back to we must prosper and flourish as a species on this planet at all costs. That's what we need to do. And it's not going to be easy, because this is these anti-human ideas that are directing this policy are entrenched in our society, and it's going to take a long time to fix it. And the unfortunate thing is, in the meantime, there's going to be some collateral damage, and our pets are part of that.
Again, they're a consequence of a bigger situation, Chris. And like you say, the things that we've been told. I remember being like 15 years old, back before I could think for myself, when I was watching CBC and I was watching David Suzuki. I know I should be repenting of that, but I did. And I remember being 15 years old, and I think there was about 4 billion people on Earth back then. And he's sitting there saying, there's too many people on Earth. It's designed to hold about 1 billion people. We got 3 billion too many people, and we need to cut the population. There's just too many people. And this was when I was 50. So this is 45 years ago. And I'm watching this, and then 25 years later, I hear this guy has 5 kids, right? And I'm like, if you as a person truly believed there's too many people on Earth, why would you as a person go have 5 children, right? Since we're overpopulated. But I mean, it worked, because if you look at Japan, they've been going backwards in their population now for almost 20 years.
True.
The childbearing people in Japan basically have passed that window almost totally, and Japan's going to basically collapse the society in the next 30 years because there just aren't going to be populated Japanese people. China has now started going backwards in population 10 years before they thought they would be going backwards in population. The only places that are going forward in population on planet Earth right now that I'm aware of are Africa and India. Those are still 2 places where the population reproduction is exceeding the death rate. Western culture, North American culture, Japan, and everywhere else is going backwards. And if you talk to, who's the richest guy in the world? Elon Musk. Someone asked him what his biggest fear is, and he says population collapse. And yet, trying to, so many people in that 18 to 35 year range right now in this country we live in think having children is a bad idea. Like, it's, I shouldn't have kids. Number one, the world's too bad. Number two, there's too many people.
Yeah. What could be more anti-human than saying it's evil for you human beings to go forth and multiply?
Exactly.
Yeah, that is true.
Well, it's we're 10 minutes, probably more like 8 minutes until we gotta shut this webinar down. So should we go and see if we can find any questions, folks? If you have questions, put a couple question marks up in the beginning and the end of it.
Yeah, there were a few comments too. Like, even so, we need to get this sort of info out to seniors. Not all of them use computers, or they're on Facebook or any other social media. We've actually had we have our ops meetings on Monday, in which we actually discuss webinars and how to do our events and how to get the APP message out. And And that is something that has come up many times, is that we can't just rely on Facebook or Rumble or BitChute. There's every other way out there. People are
And we do live events.
Live events. Yeah, you need to get people engaged, either getting out of their comfy seats at home and out to an event, which is definitely great. That's something I've been advocating for since day one, that it's great to be able to see what you see in front of your screen, but there's so much more of the world out there when you're actually at an event, and you'd be amazed at how many people you can talk to and grow your own community that way too. Just make new friends.
And on that note, so if you folks want us to do those types of things, like we also want to do those things, we have some dates booked over the next 6 weeks or so where we're going to be traveling across the province. But I just need to remind you, if you want to see that happen, please consider joining the Alberta Prosperity Project as a member. We don't necessarily want your $20 membership fee, but we certainly need it because those events cost money to do. Consider making a donation, and if you can't do that, maybe consider donating your time and help us do these things. All of those events that you see people do where they're advocating for something and they bring 1,000 or 2,000 people together to deliver a message, they're in the tens of thousands of dollars. They're not cheap, and we can't do it alone. So we do need your help.
And of course, it can't just be Chris and myself and Dennis and even Corey going out and speaking. We're hoping that this ambassador tour that we're doing right now, in which Corey kind of gives you the tools in order to actually have these conversations. If you can get out to do that, likewise, I mean, you can always buy Corey's book, The Sovereigntist Handbook, and you learn to have conversations with people that maybe you wouldn't normally be having the conversation with. And likewise, you'll find out where to have the conversations too. Maybe you go to a library. So if a senior is unsure where to go, you can go to your library. Or it was, even when I was running for the MLA position in May, I actually got to go into schools. I got to go into libraries. I got to go into retirement homes. Sadly, you can only seem to do that during an election, because after that, if you try and tell them, we want to talk a little bit about the Alberta Prosperity Project and referendum on independence, they're going to shut you down pretty quick. But then you have to have that tool set in order to be able to go in and have that conversation and say why you should be allowing me in. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Here it is.
I was going to put that one up. Did you put that one up, or did I put that one?
No, I didn't put that on.
Biden is proposing a pet tax?
That I've never heard of, and I thought maybe you would have heard
news
something
to
about
me.
that now. Okay, so
news to me.
All right. Well, we'll have to take a look into that. That does sound a little offish.
Here's the one I was looking for.
Okay, go ahead.
Marilyn asks, can you remind us who this guest is? He is informative and would love to hear more from.
Absolutely.
Am I supposed
That's
to
all
tell
you,
them?
Jim.
You can do that.
Okay.
Actually, you know what, Jim? While you're at it, can you let people know how they can help out with this situation and where they can get involved, or maybe even help out financially?
So, financial help, because of the overall economic situation, all non-for-profits that are doing great work in all the areas, and I mean, this is just the pet area. I mean, every non-for-profit in North America right now is sucking wind. So if there's people that have time to volunteer, or they have extra funds that they do want to put into this area, taking care of unhomed animals, they can get a hold of Classic Kennels at our main switchboard number, which is 403-340-0128. And the front desk person will help them in any way they need to direct their resources right now. I mean, if someone out there watching this has been thinking about adopting an animal, again, they can call that same Classic Kennels, and Classic starts with a K, phone number. And again, the front office will line them up and show them how to find the animals. We will be doing posts probably next week on animals up for adoption. We haven't had to do that for about 5 or 6 years. I like that picture you have on there right now. That's my just recently passed away daughter's dog, Kira, looking at the camera there. But yeah, we're located in the north side of Red Deer. We've been here for 35 years. And yeah, we have a bunch of beautiful animals here that are going to need homes. I won't be much available tomorrow. I'm training a bunch of police officers all day tomorrow on how to deal with dogs. But yeah, anyone that wants to reach out to Classic Kennels, the front office will aid them in directing them in how to find animals. Yeah, there's a number. Find animals, or how to even volunteer time, or how to volunteer resources.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. We are pretty much out of time by the time we run our little.
And you know,
timer.
I really enjoyed this talk because we weren't really sure how the conversation was going to go, because if you look at it from a very focused, oh, it's about pets and whatever, but this shows that it's not just everything that we talk about on this show, on these series of webinars, is not just the topic. It's about how that topic grows because of other influences. And I think that's the important thing that people really need to realize is it's not just, if it was one thing to be able to fix, we'd have a checkbox, we'd be able to fix it and give us another problem. But when you have all this stuff meshing together, how do you...
And we're trying to solve this. Just imagine if they gave us the task of solving Middle East peace, we would even have more trouble. So I think our problems
dogs over there and lick their faces. I think that would
everyone
needs
every time. Everyone needs a puppy. They'll all settle down.
All right.
Awesome.
Well,
okay, guys.
Thank you again, Jim, and thanks, folks, for watching.
Thank you so much.
I will be wolfing down some food for about 30 seconds, and then right back on with another episode of Getting Candid with the Candidates with Marco Van Hugenbos. So look forward to that.
All right. Well, thank you again,
guys.
And we'll talk to you guys next Wednesday for sure. Next Wednesday, next webinar.
And thank you, Kerry. I like your shirt. Where'd you get it?
I'm not sure where I got it from. Oh, I can't do that. There you go. Boop.
I'm gonna try and get one.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, guys.
Good night.